All right, what's up, Mike? What's going on?
What's up, Monty?
Hey, man, I can't call it. It's we're enjoying our spring break over here, so it's I have
Spring break.
2 weeks of this is the interim period between the school year, so I'm technically unemployed for 2 weeks, but whatever,
Okay.
whatever. But yeah, I'm enjoying it, except for the pollen. Pollen's killing is knocking me out. It's every
Man,
spring. I can't stand it. Can't stand it.
it's nice, man. I miss having a calendar to follow to get a sense of when
You're gonna have a calendar. You're gonna have a calendar pretty darn soon when
I'll have a
your
calendar
boy
soon, but like
when your
spring
boy
break, spring, some all the seasons
hey,
don't mean anything to
when
haven't
your
meant
boy
anything to
starts
me for
going
a
to
long
school,
time.
there's gonna be PTA meeting. It's gonna be Christmas or whatever winter program. It's gonna be Daddy, I
Oh
need a
yeah,
new
you're right.
lunchbox. You're
You're
gonna
right.
learn
You're
the
right.
schedule pretty darn quick.
No, yeah, you're
You're
right.
gonna
You're
get
right.
it
You're right.
pretty quick.
But
All
yeah,
right.
that'll be fun.
What did you have in your mind, Mike? What's on your mind this week?
So for me, it's maybe something a little bit may not be like the biggest headline, but something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, um, which is uh, the role of there. There's an article recently I saw on CNN where uh, you have the uh, the one of the players for the World Cup women's soccer team, and she was talking about the sort of imbalance between the pay of of the men's team versus the women's team,
Yes.
and that sort of also shined a spotlight on the NCAA and their treatment of men's athletes versus women's athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and that that broad topic is something that that I've been interested in for a number of years now, because ever since ever since the WNBA came out, like when they first started, there was always this issue of the women's game is never going to be as good as the women's game is never going to be as good as the men's game, and and but then you would hear all these things that, at least at the time, they were talking about, like how the women's game is better basketball. They play better basketball in the women's game than they do in the men's game. So why is the women's game much less popular than the men's game? And and you know, you have maybe freak athletes on, you have like freak male athletes, freak female athletes, and they're doing amazing things, but then they're saying like, well, men are dunking. Men, the difference between the men's game and the women's game is the men, they have dunks, and that's it. And I was just saying, like, for me, that was something that was interesting to me, because when I would watch the the women's game, I don't know, there's something about it. I just couldn't get into it. But at the same time, I think it was very personality driven to an extent, because I'm not someone who's really into like college basketball either. But I love watching NBA basketball. Like, I love watching NBA basketball, and I'll watch
Yeah.
even sort of terrible games. I'll follow some terrible games because
Yeah.
some fun things might happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I have a tough time getting into college games, and I have a tough time getting into the women's games.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. And the thing is, like, I was thinking about this with regard to sports in general, because uh, I feel like it's an interesting sort of entry point when you talk about equal pay, or equal
Yeah.
compensation, or equal facilities and that kind of thing for the men's game and the women's game. I think that's an interesting sort of like entry point. But I think I was just kind of curious about, like, if there is a specific gender bias, or if it's really just the quality of the game's better, like, are is it just like that's the thing. Like for me, it's interesting because when I look at it from the perspective of tennis, I love watching women's
Oh,
tennis.
that's right. That's right. That's why I was going to go with you. But keep going. Keep going.
Whereas
Men's tennis.
the irony is men's tennis, the men are so good.
No, no,
Men's
no,
tennis is actually
no.
quite boring.
Why? I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say it's so good. I would
Well,
say that.
right.
I would say that in men's tennis, they serve so hard that it's not enjoyable. Like the person
Right. So
serving
basically,
is going to win the game more times than not. Right.
right. The power aspect of
That's
the
right.
power aspect of the men's game is such that
Makes
I
it
think
less
they've
entertaining.
sort of
Right?
they sort of have undermined. It's weird because I would say it's almost analogous to what's happening with 3-pointers in the NBA. Is that people are getting so good at 3-pointers that it's sort of eliminating all these other cool aspects of the game.
Well,
in basketball.
Gosh, you're going to make me go on a rant about basketball. So I first of all, I stopped watching NBA. I first of all, I don't watch it for a number of reasons. One is I'm busy, but second
Sure.
is that the NBA game as a coach, right? First of all, I don't really understand the rules of traveling or what's a travel, what's a double dribble, because they're taking 4 steps to gather the ball. So that part of it bothers me. The other part is these guys are teaming up, and you have the LeBron and the Michael Jordan fans like, oh, there were super teams before that. And it's like, hey man, I want to just see a playoffs where I don't know who's going to win. But that aside, with the NBA game, the appeal of the NBA game is that you're seeing stuff that you're just not going to see anywhere else. You're not going to see someone do what Steph Curry can do. You're not going to see that. Like one person who is he can make a shot from anywhere on the floor, and he knows it. Everyone on his team knows it. And everyone in the other team knows it. And it's fun watching teams adjust to the fact that there's this guy who can pull up from 45 feet away from the basket. And they're like, oh my God, it's going in, right? Or you have guys like LeBron, who's basically a football player who plays like he's my size. Like he's that nimble and that powerful. And so, you get that in men's basketball, right? Or you get Kevin Durant, he probably weighs less than we do. And he's 7 feet tall. He's a freaking unicorn dribbling between his legs. But you can see that in men's basketball. So that aside, right? If you are a basketball, I would say like this: if you were a basketball coach, you would be more interested in women's basketball. Like if you are a basketball geek, women's basketball is a better brand of basketball, but it's not a more entertaining brand of basketball, and that's where the problem is.
So that's the thing, right? So it's kind of like, this may not be a great analogy, but it's just like maybe watching a documentary versus watching a fictionalized, account of a movie. Like it's like watching a biopic versus watching an actual documentary biography, right, on a topic. And so that's the thing. There's more entertainment value in the men's game, perhaps. And maybe that's what I was saying. Like my original premise for this thought was that it's really the money is where the money is made. And so like the more entertaining product is going to pull in more money. And so therefore that's going to be where all the money goes to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that is actually indeed the case, because that's why I kind of want to talk about tennis, because I don't know the actual economics of professional tennis, but I feel like the men still make more than the women, even though I feel like the women's game,
if they do, it's not there's not a big disparity.
So it is. So in that regard, then I hope it is sort of like very much a meritocracy.
I think first of all, without a doubt, Naomi Osaka is the highest paid female athlete. Like that's without a doubt.
Oh, really?
I'm not sure if she's the highest paid tennis player or not. She might be, because you can say what you want about the disparity, but if Naomi Osaka is playing Serena Williams, people are watching that. People are watching that now. And here, this is where I can't like just because I'm liberal. I get the liberal thing, but there's got to be a balance, right? And my response to hearing this is, you need to tell women to watch women's basketball. Like, you guys want the money like men's basketball. Men watch men's basketball. We watch that, but you can't come over and tell, hey guys, you got to watch our basketball too. This world is half men, half women, roughly. Women can watch basketball. Like, just sit down and watch it. If women watch NCAA basketball in equal numbers, there will be as much or more money in women's basketball as there is in men's basketball. Simply put, when you're running a commercial during the first weekend of the men's basketball tournament, you're getting a lot of eyeballs on that commercial. So
this is my thing too. So I'm curious. This is going to be a sort of maybe a silly analogy, but that makes me wonder about like the XFL, right? Because, is it an inferior product, or is there some aspect of it that can catch on, but maybe it's just needs more time for marketing, or it needs like some time to build up? Like, because for me,
I think that's more market saturation than anything. Like,
you think so?
Well, because the NFL is played at such a high level, right? So you have the NFL season, and then you have college football that's basically packed together, and you get that from August to February, right?
You get the whole sort of
you're getting like the very best football players watching in the NFL, and then you're getting the next group of the very best football players in college, and so you're getting that. And from like August until February, it's just this overdose, like football. So like, I don't know if there's a lot of room for more football that is not as good. Like, I think there was a market for it, but certainly that market is not going to match anything close to what's in the fall. Like, there's just not.
Maybe but that's the same issue with maybe that's the same thing with basketball, because basically, the NBA draft and the NBA, like all the sort of off-season stuff for basketball, I feel like totally outshines the WNBA, which basically goes in the same time. So, like, again, I don't know, because I haven't seen WNBA in forever. Like, would you say that the WNBA product, you said as a coach, it is better basketball? Like, qualitatively, it is
more team oriented basketball, and to be honest, the WNBA actually has some stars, but again, men that love basketball, like, if the WNBA is in a time of the year where there's absolutely nothing else to watch, like, you'll get some people to watch it because basketball folks are just going to want to watch basketball, but as you understand, like, sports are year round now. So like, if people that follow basketball in the summer, they're talking about AAU teams and college recruitment and who's going where and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Let me ask you this. So sorry to interrupt, but like, so for me, and I'm a casual NBA fan. So the way that I interact with basketball now is I'll watch a lot of the compilations that they put on YouTube. Basically, like, I don't even watch whole games anymore. I just watch the diced up clips of like the highlights.
Mike, nobody's watching full games anymore.
So at any rate, but the thing is, when I'm watching NBA games, like even the cut up versions, there will be like 5 or 6 moments where I'll just be like, wow, that is awesome. That's awesome. And I'm curious, because maybe it's because of the algorithm just hasn't found it, or maybe they don't exist. But if I were to watch a diced up clip of a WNBA game, would I still have those same moments? Would I be blown away by like sequences in the same way?
I think what we have to remember is we have to remember what basketball in the 90s did to us, right? Like, because remember, before the 90s, basketball, in the men's basketball in particular, it was played underneath the rim. So you had Magic Johnson, you had Larry Bird. They were doing flashy passes. They were doing team passes. They were shooting. Then you had the Pistons.
It was dominated by big men, though.
Yeah, well, big men, and it was more physical game than it was athletic game, right?
Sure.
And then you had like the Pistons. They were the last team of that era that were physical, and they didn't really have a really athletic
Well, I
offensive
mean,
player, right?
Knicks Heat, 90s Knicks, 90s Heat, or
Yes,
yeah.
but remember, '90s Knicks, '90s Heat came after 6 years of Michael Jordan, right? Because
Okay.
you have the '90s where Michael Jordan, they kind of open up the game, they kind of stop the physical fouls, and they let the game flow freer. And then you have Michael Jordan, and people are like, "Holy, what the hell is
Right.
this?" And you get 3 years of
Right.
that, and then he retires, and he comes back and get 3 more years of it, and people's eyes are hanging out their socket. Like, what is people can play basketball like that? And then from hit that area, you just get like this high flying dunking and super athletic, skinny guys that are playing basketball in a way that you've never seen before. And then you get, you'll go from him to like Kobe and LeBron and Kevin Durant.
Then it was like
and,
the one-on-one
yeah.
era, basically.
Well, yeah, but you also just have these guys that are making these incredibly athletic, highlight-worthy plays day in and day out, right? So you don't have to watch the game to see what was the most like exciting part of it. You could just click on your phone, like, holy moly, how in the hell did he do that? And that's what the '90s did, right? Like '90s, you wake up in the morning and you turn on Sports Center. You're like, what happened? What happened? What happened? And then you have Stuart Scott's like, that must be jelly because Jam don't shake like that. And Michael Jordan
Right.
must be butter because he's on a roll. And you're just like, oh, it's like the first 10 minutes of Sports Center is like, okay, Bulls highlights. Come on. Right. And so our generation, we grew up with that, right? Oh dear. Our generation, we grew up with that. And then we go from the Michael Jordan area into this, right? So basketball by our definition is not a team game, it's a star game, right?
Sure.
You turn on the TV because you want to see LeBron, you want to see Kevin Durant, you want to see Kyrie Irving, you want to see Steph Curry, you want to see the stars, right? And in a way, it's helped the NBA, it's hurts the NBA because when you don't have stars, you can't compete XYZ. Okay, but the men's game is a star game, so when you have Steph Curry coming to Atlanta, tickets, boom, they dry up. Everyone wants to see it, right? When Kevin Durant's going to Sacramento, sell out, right? When LeBron James goes to Charlotte, sell out. Like people want to see that. So the women's game, how do you temper that? Like America's not a team culture. We don't do team stuff. That's not how America does it. America does the I stuff. Like I want to see the person that I can imagine I am when I'm playing basketball, right?
Well, I'm wondering if it is a fan thing, because as you're talking, I'm thinking that the NBA fan, I feel like, is a very specific demographic.
You
or
sure
maybe
about
not
that?
a specific demographic, but I feel like, so I guess like what I'm meaning is, I feel like the average NBA fan, I could be totally wrong about this, but the impulse that I had as you're talking is the average NBA fan may not necessarily be a WNBA fan, is what I'm saying. Is like, so basically, in order for them to like, if you like NBA basketball, then the WNBA is actually a different product.
It is very
altogether.
different product. It's a different product.
And so the WNBA actually has to build up its own audience for it, because it's not like immediately transferable. It's not like suddenly, all these, it's not like basketball fans. I feel like maybe what you're saying is that like a lot of NBA fans are specifically NBA fans, and maybe they're very specific NBA star fans, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, but you have to realize that is what pushes ratings numbers. Like,
sure,
there are a core group of fans in any sport that are going to watch anything that comes on, right? But that's not a very large number. That doesn't matter what sport it is. Even if you're talking about American football, like there's they have games where people are just like, I don't want to see these two teams play each other. The Jets we're going to play the Browns. Who cares? Except
Yeah.
Jets fans, Browns fans, people that are gambling, and hardcore football fans. So that happens in the NBA as well. So it's not just that part of it. So you could have on you can have on a game that a basketball fan just says, instead of watching this game, I'd like to do something else.
To be honest, now that we're talking about this, I feel like this is the one aspect of tribalism that I really like. Is I like being a fan of a region for whatever reason. Like I like, because the thing is, like, even though the Atlanta team sucked when I was growing up, I liked rooting for Atlanta just growing up. And even though like I didn't care about a lot of the sports, like if I saw, like for example, like when hockey came to Atlanta, I was just like, I don't know the Thrashers, but you know, if I see that they won, I'm just like, all right, cool, Atlanta. You know, same thing, like, you know, with college teams or whatever, like, you know, whatever.
Well,
March Madness, I don't follow the college game, but if there's a Georgia team in the mix, I'm just like, awesome.
Well, there are three places where that works really very heavily for fans, right? First of all, it's college sports. So certainly college football, college basketball, like those are really, really region specific, right? And baseball, like people are fans of their baseball team. So if you're a fan of the Braves, you're a fan of the Braves. Like those there between college football, college basketball, and baseball, and I guess to an extent the NFL, but it's not as much so as college football. But like that region thing, that matters. Like that's one reason why, like college football prints money. They print money. Like the NFL is printing money, sure. But college football, especially in the South, they're printing money. Like if they have like guys like running sprints, people want to watch it. So it's so region specific.
I mean, that's what I like about. That's the one aspect of sports that I feel like is becoming de-emphasized these days. Is that there's a connection to the regions or the connection to a specific, whether it's a specific school or I mean, there's still that aspect of it, but it's hard for me to buy into, you know, the one and done era, because it's just like, okay, if a student is just like basically spends 7-8 months on a campus and then they're immediately going pro, then are they really part of that college? Like maybe, I guess it's technically, but like, you know, I feel like the norm now is 1 year and then they're done with college. Whereas at least I guess when we were growing up, like they still had, you know, people not declare for the NBA, for example, till they finish their senior year, you know? And that was the thing. And so for me, I like the story of the kid that went to college in Georgia and then went to the Atlanta Hawks. And you're just like, oh, cool. So it's a hometown kid. We're playing for the hometown team. And he got drafted by that team. And he's going to play his career for that team. And he's just going to be our guy, win or lose, right? Whereas nowadays, it's like players change teams every year.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things that's that's one of the things that hurts my interest in the NBA, is that it's so focused on the highlight. So almost to the point where like who wins the championship, it almost doesn't matter, because this year in particular, there are only like 2.5 teams that even have a chance to win. I would say 2 teams if the Lakers can get healthy. There's basically only one team that can win the championship this year. So I don't know. It just that's just the modern NBA. The last time I really cared about NBA was when the Warriors kind of came out of nowhere in 2016. And I was like, what's going on here?
Pre-Durant,
Yeah, pre-Durant, right? Where they were playing this brand of ball, they're passing the ball and they're running around and they're doing all this off the ball action and screening, and the ball is moving and the people are moving, which is basically women's basketball. But they have this dude called Steph Curry who, I want to watch everything that he does. Yes. But in defense of the women's game, though, there are some really entertaining women to watch. The Atlanta Dream have this guard. Let's see if I can get her name right. She's basically female Iverson. I mean, she's really fast. Like, she's really interesting to watch. Like, but the only thing about watching women's basketball is that you're not going to see any dunks. So you were talking about this part of it. There was a conversation. I don't know if you've heard about it. You said you listened to some things, right? Mm-hmm. You know who Candace Parker is?
Candace Parker, yeah. She was like the best player in the world for
pretty much, yeah,
for a while, yeah.
So she was having a discussion with Shaq,
right? Didn't she retire?
I think so, but I think she's still playing. She's still young enough to play, I think, maybe. But she was having a conversation with Shaquille O'Neal on the NBA show, right? And Shaquille O'Neal suggested that they lower the rims to 9 feet. And so, of course, she took offense to it. He said, if you did that, to make the game more interesting. And then she said, I don't know, she kind of attacked his free throw shooting and said, well, you couldn't shoot free throw, something like that. But the point stands that the suggestion of lowering the rim was taken as was offensive, right?
Well, they already have a smaller ball.
They have a smaller ball, you're right. And they have a closer 3-point line, right?
Yeah. But, I mean, it's just like, what? So that's the other part of it, right? So like, at what point do you want to service the entertainment value? But frankly, that's the part that I was trying to parse out earlier, which is, I don't even know how much dunking is important for my entertainment value, because for me, like I said, when I watch these cut up highlights, I feel like, again, with the modern game, I feel like half the time where I'm just like, wow, is when the people pull up from wherever,
I think there's a baseline issue that's going on in America right now, and I might get canceled, whatever. But the baseline issue is that, however, you can go back to, I don't know, you could draw a line somewhere, but there's this underlying belief that men and women are exactly the same. And
so that's the other issue I want.
So if you're trying to do all of this off of, we're the same, everything should be equal. I mean, I can't have children. I can't have babies. Like, I didn't have women chase after me when I was 22 years old because I was a hot piece of booty, right? Like that's something that happens to like any skinny, decent looking woman when she's 18. So all of a sudden she's just this red hot magnet, and every dude that walks by her is like, what are you doing tonight? Like that, there are just fundamental differences in the sexes, and to try and legislate the equality of the outcome is very difficult thing to do when it's not happening in a vacuum.
But that's what I was alluding to. That's what I was kind of alluding to with the sports fan or the basketball fan, because I feel like, and I could be wrong, I have no idea, but I want to say that the average sports fan, I think it's probably more male than female.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was saying. Like, I feel like, maybe I'm being cynical, or maybe I'm being, overgeneralizing, but like, I feel like a lot of guys are not necessarily going to want to watch women play sports. I think,
but
dudes like watching dudes play sports.
I don't think that is the responsibility of men to watch women's sports.
So sure. But ultimately, that's where, like, I think it's interesting in terms of, because like, what's interesting to me is that what sports are popular are totally arbitrary anyway. Just in general, like, to me, like, because there's a part of me when I try to analyze sports in general, like, it seems so odd that it's these X sports that are super popular, but then other X sports are not as popular.
Well, that's cultural. I mean, that depends on where you are, right?
But like, the thing is, when you look at it from the aspect of, like, it's just as freakish to be amazing at bowling as it is to be amazing at golf, right? Like, basically, they are doing something, or even something like, if you look at some of the events in the Olympics, like, curling,
golf, and there's There's a big difference. There's a big difficulty difference in golf and bowling. Oh
but
man,
what I'm saying is just like in
beginner
terms
can,
of
yeah, but go ahead. A beginner
if you're
can actually
looking,
like attempt to bowl. Go ahead.
if you're looking at like freakish sort of acts of, you know, whatever, like someone who is an amazing pool player,
Yeah.
or someone that's an amazing, or like you can even go even push things even further, like someone who's able to do like Guinness Book of World Records type,
Yeah.
like oddities, are extreme, can do extreme physical, you know, some you know, physical feats, like the Highlander games, like being able to toss a log and like just all sorts of weird
Oh,
stuff.
You mean like ESPN 8, right?
Right, whatever, yeah. Like those are just arguably just as freakish as being able to hit an awesome jump shot, right? Or being able to like sink a, you know, like sink a putt from, you know, from you know, from the rough or whatever, being able to like, yeah, like, and so, or, you know, eagle like a really difficult hole. So like just as freakish, but these sports just happen to be more popular, or whatever, like hitting a curveball or whatever. Like that's the thing. It's like that. Those are the things, like just as freakish, but not nearly as popular. So the fan bases are just gonna, you know, it's arbitrary. Like fan bases are gonna follow what the fan bases follow.
Yeah.
But I was just curious in terms of like, you know, when we look at the actual constructs that exist now, where going back to the original article, where the women's team clearly out in the US, this women's soccer team clearly outperforms the men's team in competitions. But apparently the facilities for the men are far superior, and they get paid more. And even though
Well,
like
but
the
but
women's
that
team
isn't,
wins gold medal after gold medal.
well, but that I mean, but again, what is the most popular sport in the world? It's soccer, right?
Right.
So the American men are going into that world as an underdog, playing the most popular sport in the world. If you are a soccer club in any country, really, and you're trying to get the best soccer players, or I'm sorry, football players,
Okay.
the best football players to come to your squad and take your contract, they have to do that to compete.
So you're saying that the money in the men's pie is much bigger.
dude,
So
dude, you know who are the top? Do you know who the top 5 highest paid athletes in the world are?
yeah, they're all soccer players, right?
Well, they're not all soccer players, but they're
most of them.
But certainly, was it Ronaldo and
Ronaldo
and
Messi.
Messi? Like they blink their eyes and they make $5 million. Like
Yeah.
like hey, let me rephrase. I can walk into my classroom tomorrow. Who are the 5 most popular athletes? Who are your 5 most famous, or the 5 athletes that you like the best? I'll probably get it some Japanese baseball players. I'll get Shohei Ohtani, right? For the Angels, right? You're going to get like a bundle of soccer players. And you might get LeBron James or Stephen Curry. And that's it. So, and this here, but it's not just here, like Africa, Europe, doesn't matter where you go. Everyone watches soccer. Right. And they're not watching women's soccer. They're watching men's soccer. And also think about, and this is not, I mean, women's soccer is huge in America. That's great for America. Women's soccer is not huge around the world. It simply isn't. No, so like I haven't taught at a school that has a girls soccer team. So girls, they want to play soccer, they run out there with the boys, and they'll have a couple of girls soccer teams. But volleyball, softball, tennis, they have that. And to be fair, even if one of the reasons they don't have a women's soccer team is because you need at least 11 girls that want to play soccer. And you need 11 girls every single year that want to play soccer, not volleyball, not tennis. That's my sister.
No, yeah, but that makes a lot of sense. I think actually, I feel like this is one of the few things that has been answered to my satisfaction. One of the few things we've talked about that like where I had no idea going in, but now I have a very clear picture. Like it seems, I feel like the bigger dimension of it is just the money. It seems like a pretty simple, but still frustrating situation, but it seems pretty simple in that it really just literally is where the money is. And it's so sure, it would be nice to support women's sports and especially like the women's team because they're doing better. It would be nice to support them more, but ultimately, because of where the money is, where the money's coming from, they're getting paid proportionally to whatever is actually being pulled in.
I think that's there's a part of that, right? But also like,
or at least that makes sense to me.
well, I guess what I want to say, and this is kind of related, but I understand that women want the same rights as men. They want to be treated like men. They want things to be equal. In a vacuum, they want things to be equal. I understand that. I get that part of it. But like in most countries, maternity leave and paternity leave are not the same. Like
right.
there are certain advantages that you have to being a female, right? And what I'm not hearing is women willing to give those advantages up, right? So I can't, I don't, there are a lot of different, I have to slow down and be more deliberate. This is what I learned watching my last video. Okay, so when I think of like some rights that women have that they're not going to give up, right? Like if a woman wants to have an abortion, she could do it with or without your consent, right? I don't see women marching in the street saying men should have the right to have a say in who gets abortion. It's my body, my choice, right? So that's a one-way decision. Now, as a poor regular dude, I can't really look around and say that there are a lot of rights that I have that women don't have. Like,
so now you're talking about like the Bill Burr joke.
Well, yes. So like
where
it,
he's like, look, ladies.
Oh, the easiest job, the hardest job in the world.
No. The joke that he has where it's like basically women get paid less than men, but when there's a burning building, it's always women and children first. Like I have to stay in the burn. The price that the men pay is they have to stay in the building or on the boat when it's sinking. Or like,
well, but Mike, you went to
to
school for economics, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you were in your economics classes, right? Because you were at Emory, so they have a lot of like a liberal arts, right? Like acting and music and all that. In your classes, what was the
not acting, but yeah.
What in economics classes, what was the ratio of men to women? Was it relatively equal?
No. It was predominantly men.
Now like, that said, people all around the world, or especially people in America, they understand that there's good money in banking, right? So why aren't more women going? Well, why aren't there more women in that economics class? That's a very legitimate question to ask, right? Like,
it's a good question. Yeah.
Like why? I mean, if you know where the money is in banking. It's in law. It's in medicine. It's in engineering. So those classes, if you want the same salary, you have to want to do these jobs that aren't fun and glamour. Like being an entry level engineer, chemist, what do you call it? Economic forecaster. That's not glamorous. That's sitting in front of a computer 80 hours a week, getting paid entry level fees, wearing a suit every day, working Saturday, Sunday, and it sucks. And somebody has to do that, right?
It's interesting because I mean, if we're going to sort of shift gears slightly and go into like the whole salary, the sort of women's equality and the pay gap, what I think is interesting is that there are three factors that are often underrepresented a lot of times when they talk about the statistics, the whatever, like the 74 cents to a dollar.
Yeah, that's right.
Like the number usually shifts, but like one of them is like what you just mentioned is like the actual, if they take it in, a lot of times they take it in aggregate and say they don't really factor in like which jobs.
That's right.
Which jobs that that are being taken. A second really big factor, which I had never heard, but like I remember hearing on a couple of occasions, like on different news reports, different podcasts, is that I think, I can't remember the statistic, but like men overwhelmingly ask for promotions more. Like basically on average, like women will not request or will not go for promotions, won't seek out promotions, whereas men like overwhelmingly will ask for promotions. And so like and that's a major factor in terms of bumps in pay.
And I would say also in response to that, I think that there are some women now, especially in America, that will go after the promotion. But when that promotion comes up, you know what it means. That means that there's an extra 10, 15 hours of your week that are going to disappear into that job. Do you want that? Do you want that? Because if you want it, you can stand up and say, hey, I want the promotion. And I would venture to say that if you are a competent woman and you go up for the promotion, you might actually have an edge over someone else, because you can be the I don't know, what's the word I want to, that's a symbol of social progress. Like you're competent, you're like, even here in this country, there are female vice principals, female principals, but to get there has to be a sacrifice in order. Like you're not going to see your kids that much. You're going to sacrifice some family stuff. There's going to be a sacrifice in order. Go ahead.
But that's the thing. That's another aspect though that I think is kind of linked to the third thing I was going to mention, but it's also broadly more cultural, which is a lot of times like, so the third thing I was going to say is a lot of times it discounts the amount of time lost for childbirth a lot of times. So a lot of times people lose wages or lose salary because there isn't always maternity leave. There isn't always you're not always working a job where you have that option.
That's right.
And if you have a child, you're going to lose a lot of working time. Or a lot of employers, sadly, may not hire a woman. They may opt for hiring a man because of the concern for having to pay maternity leave.
Well, I think that is a part of it. And also you think about like some jobs where you're going to have to depend on certain person for a decade or a decade plus. Sure. Like if you're a lawyer and a becoming lawyer in a law firm, and the woman is 30, and are we going to make her a partner? Yes or no? The question becomes, what are her plans for family? Because if she has plans for family, that's the decade to do it.
But that's the interesting thing, right? Because the cultural thing that I wanted to sort of touch on is, yes, there is the biological difference in terms of like literally in most cases, women will have to physically be, maybe out of commission for a certain amount of time. But there's also a social stigma, or not a social stigma, but like a social pressure for women to be responsible for the families. Like you don't really see a lot of like, I feel like
but I would tell you, but this is why I would push back against that a little bit, because our generation, and I'm going through this because I've had to learn to be a bit more unapologetically masculine. Like walk into a room like, hey, I'm a man, I'm the man here. Like I'm not going to be apologizing because I'm in the room. A guy is here. And that's kind of something I've had to reverse engineer. I brought up that to say this. I think now in 2020, I think if you asked a good number of boys or men between 18 and 35, would you like to be a stay-at-home dad? I think that you would get a large percentage of boys that would say, you know what, I have no problem with that. If my wife were okay with that, I would love to do that. The question becomes, why, or would women be attracted to that? Like, do they want a husband that does that? Because if you
There's
were
that
able
aspect
to
as
switch
well,
those
sure.
roles, that would actually solve some of these issues that we're dealing in society. But I would say one issue that's kind of happening, because remember, this social mobility and all of this is relatively recent, because up until what, our grandparents, basically, in America, because you can look around the world and it's more traditional than it is as in America now. But look, women wanted to be home and raise a family and all of that. So now you have women that want to take a higher place, an elevated place in society, but they don't want a man beneath them. They want a man above them, right? So I make 100,000 a year. I want a man that's making 150,000 a year. But the guy that's making 150,000 a year, he wants a stay-at-home wife to raise his children, right? So how are these women going to find a partner if the one that people they want to pair up with don't want a woman that's working 8 hours a week?
It's complex, because
It is very
there are a
complex.
lot of these established perceptions of gender roles, or or even family roles or whatnot. Because when you look at, because what I was talking about primarily was not so much about that. I mean, I think what you talked about is also a big factor in terms of uh, trying to being maybe traditionally like the working person versus the stay-at-home homemaker, right?
Yeah.
But I was even what I was also what I also want to talk about is a lot of when, so like if a woman decides to be to pursue career uh, by itself, right? I feel like they often will get more pressure about starting a family, or about, like, I feel like the concept for women a lot of times is,
where do
you
you think
have,
the pressure comes from?
so it's I think part of it is from, well, I feel a lot of it is family. Like, for example, in the East, like
In the
in
East,
Korea,
yes. In
yeah,
the
like in
East, absolutely
Korea,
family.
you'll see something like, but here's the thing. I think it also happens. You will never, like, a dude never has to apologize, or never has to defend themselves about seeking their career, about being wholly career driven. If they want to follow a career path, it is essentially normal for a man to pursue a career, not have any children, not get married, and just go straight on, be a pure career person. I think, whereas, and again, this is purely anecdotal, I have no idea of what the statistics are, but I feel like on average, from my experience, it would be odd for a woman, like for example, I talk to people in Korea all the time, where are women who don't have, who are career, like career women, like high level executive women, and why not, and this is just me, maybe I'm talking about just my own biases or whatever, but when I talk to them, and I hear that they are not married, or they don't have children, it's surprising to me. I'm just like, oh. And whereas it's like, if a dude says that, it's not a surprise to me, weirdly. But like when a woman tells me, like, oh, they are at a high level career, but they don't have a family or don't have a significant other, it's weird to me. And maybe
Well,
that's, and again,
I
maybe that
don't,
says more about me than
I wouldn't
whatever.
say, for me, the issue is not necessarily the weird or not weird. I would say more the issue is that what they really want? Because if that's what they really want, that's great for them. Like
Sure.
if you're happy working 80, 90 hours a week until you're 50, 60 years old, and then buying a boat and retiring, that's great. Like
But
that's,
that's what I'm saying, is that if
but
I extrapolate, like
well,
assuming,
go ahead.
well, assuming that I am an average person, I could, again, this could just be my own, bias, but like, but I feel like that that is fair. Like, I think that might be representative, where I think it is unusual for an average person to think like, oh, this lady did not get married. That's odd. This lady does not have children. That's odd. Whereas a guy faces most likely less of that sort of scrutiny in
Well,
terms of their personal life.
I would say though that a great motivating factor in a man working his tail off and doing all of that is so that he can get a mate. Like,
Possibly.
or possibly. I think that's the history of mankind. You work hard so one woman want to be with you so you can have kids, right?
But
like
that, that could be the source of it, and that that's what sort of perpetuated this whole sort of imbalance. But yeah, I feel like that imbalance is there.
Yeah,
but then on the other hand, to continue with the thought, at least with the family part, is like a lot of times, like again, anecdotally, when I was growing up, very seldom, like probably, I did get some pressure to get married or to find someone, or to have a family, but not nearly as much as my sister did.
Yeah.
And when I look at women, when I've communicated, when I've talked to women out here, either students or just acquaintances or whatever, and they are in their 30s and they are career driven, they get a huge amount of pressure from their families to get married, and they dread seeing their families because they're tired of answering the marriage question, the family question.
I can understand.
And it's just and so there's that factor. Plus, there's also this weird notion where if a woman wants to pursue a career, then they have to do both. They have to have a family plus manage their career. Whereas I feel like the pressure to do that is less with men. They're because it's I feel like when women pursue careers, it's always an additive as opposed to a substitute, it's not a matter of choosing between having a family and being a homemaker or being a career person. It's you have to have a career on top of being a homemaker.
Well, but I would say, and this is where when we go back to the article, right? Go back to the article and the premise behind the article, and we're equal and we should treat women the same as men.
Sure.
I'm 45 years old and I can father a child tomorrow, right? But my 45-year-old counterpart, female, can't do that. So
it's much riskier. Yeah.
So, or it's not as easily, right? So I think a lot of that, I don't know, family pressure or societal pressure comes from the fact that
the biology
women can have children at 15 and 16 years old, and that lasts until about 35, maybe 40. But then after that, you're looking at taking risk. And so there's probably a part of people that's saying, if you want a family, just jump in there, get it over with. And when the kid is 6 years old, they get to school, then you can jump back into your career. Because that reminds
me of the Nate Bargatze joke. Sorry, go on.
The what? What is that joke?
So the Nate Bargatze joke is he watches he's a 45-year-old comic, and he has a young baby now, and he's like, man, those teen moms, they had it right, because basically by the time if you had a child at 15, at this point, by his age, that kid's gone, and he can kind of enjoy his life now. And he's like, they have the answer. Have the child when you're 15.
Well, how about my sister, right? My sister, she was what, junior in college? She got pregnant, right? She finished school, of course. But her oldest daughter now is in college. Now, she's a junior in college, right? So 21 plus 21 is 42, right? So imagine your children are grown in your mid 40s. Imagine that.
That's awesome.
I mean, awesome. You solve the reproductive issue, and if you had them young, maybe even in college or right after college, by the time you're 30, you jump back into your career with both feet. Hey, let's go. But when you're at 30 and you haven't done any of that, then the prospect of you getting any of that goes down each year that you double down on your career, right? So there's a big issue with this. There's this guy, Kevin Samuels. He has a big YouTube channel, and really big stir in the Black community, because people are, it's just, you know, you have a lot of professional Black women who basically get to their mid 30s and they're like, I need a man. I want a man now. I want to order up one. And some of these women are making, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, $100,000 plus. They're making a lot of money, and they want a man making 200,000. But for, number one, there aren't a lot of men making 200,000, and number two, the men that make 200,000, they want something that's not what a lot of these women are. So there's a big stink, and people are really all up. It's just a really interesting. I would challenge you to watch at least a couple of his videos, because it'd be quite interesting. But
yeah,
he's just bringing up and he's bringing up a conversation that mirrors this.
That's a whole other. I feel like that's another topic we could definitely talk about in terms of just like, you know, relationship expectations, because I would love to start to sort of scratch at what you're talking about, like the psychology behind being an earner of a, you know, a 6-figure salary and then wanting someone who earns more still, like having that, because like that to me is fascinating, because
well, I think that's our biology.
That is, there's a conflict. There's a weird.
Well, I think that's our biology, right? I think women.
I don't know. Those strong words.
Well, I think women want the best man they could possibly get, right? Like if for men, we want our territory. We want to own our house, right? So like we're fine with finding a woman that's working at McDonald's. If she's really pretty and she's really feminine, whatever, we're like, hey, listen, let's do it. Let's build something here, right? But if that woman who had to scrap and claw her way through college and claw her way up the career ladder, she's not going to want a man that's like, hey, honey, I'm glad that you're home. She doesn't want that. She wants.
I'm curious, yeah.
She wants it's like the guy that's more raw than she is, right?
I think, like I said, I think it's fascinating. I think that I would love to dig deeper into that psychology, because again, as much as I would love to push back against that, right? I feel like I'm curious to get a woman's opinion on some of these things, because I think a more a sort of a clear illustration of what you're talking about is height.
Yep.
Is that I feel like a woman is always seeking, and again, I could be wrong, but they're always looking for someone taller. And I just think like that's so arbitrary. And I wonder, like you said, is it a biological thing that you want that protection? Maybe is it ingrained where you're just like psychologically you're thinking more money means I'm more protected. Someone that's bigger means I'm more protected. If it's something like that, where you can't, where it is biological and you can't escape that as a woman, or if it's a social construct that has that you know that can be broken. I don't know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I think that and what we're seeing in America, we're seeing it real time. We're seeing America go through this experiment where we're rewriting the rules of what men and women are, what men and women do, and like other countries are not doing it as fast as America is. So America in real time is going through this, who's going to marry who, and people are getting married later and they're having fewer kids, and the people that are having kids are lower income, and people with more education are putting off kids or not getting married at all. And you having, and what happens when you have a generation like our generation of 45, 50-year-old women going into the next decade unmarried, right? Like what happens when you have, because clearly women they live longer than us. For whatever reasons you want to put on the table. What does that do to Social Security? What does it do to like just life as we know it in America when you have large amounts of single older women? Like what happens then? Because men get single, older, and we fall on hard times. You just get kicked out in the street and roam the street for you know, aluminum cans, and people give you $1 to go get some alcohol and you know guzzle it down. But what happens when you start seeing large amounts of homeless women or distressed women, right?
That there's two things, right? That brings up two things for me. So on the one hand, to address what you just mentioned, is I've always been curious, and this is purely anecdotal as well, is where are the homeless women? Like, I feel like homeless men, just from my experience, outnumber homeless women like 10 to 1.
You see
I think basically for every 10 homeless dudes I've seen, there's maybe one homeless lady. And a lot of times it's a lady who's super old. It's like a grandma, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, where are the homeless ladies? I'm not sure.
And also, what about the attitude towards homeless men? It's almost like, hey, go get a job. What's wrong with you? Like,
sure,
get over it.
I mean,
right?
that's a whole other issue as well.
Yeah. So
in terms of homelessness as an issue.
But you were going to make a second point, right?
Yeah. So the second thing I just forgot. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, we can get back to it. So what were you going to say?
Well, so you can chalk this up to masculine, feminine, or being a man versus being a lady. But there is something that I've always been acquainted with since I started playing Pop Warner football, doing Taekwondo. No excuses. Stop making excuses. Like, get the job done or let someone else do it. That is a baseline reality of masculinity. Like, you're born with the, you're born as a young boy. The first thing you're told is stop making excuses. There are no excuses. So with that kind of mindset, like, we go into the world knowing if we're going to become anything, or if we're going to retire comfortably, we're going to have to do something of note or of worth so that we can sit in a house that we've created and relax. That has been, it is on us. But for women, they've always had the opportunity to marry a man that has already done it. Like that is I don't want to call it a career path, but it is an option. Like, there's a very rare option for a man to marry a super rich woman and retire, right? Like, I'm good, I made it. Woo.
Especially in Japan.
Just out anywhere, unless you're marrying someone that's much older and she just wants, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but that option is there. It's maybe it's always been there, but it's certainly still there now. Like, when you see a man, like, look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a successful businessman, however you want to look at it, and he has his third wife. Melania Trump knows what came with that, and she still signed up to marry him. Like, she knew who she was marrying, right? Sure. But because she married Donald Trump, the end of that marriage, she's going to walk away with several millions of dollars, and she's going to be set for life, period. Now, is that an option for regular Joe, hot-looking 25-year-old dude, that a 40-year-old woman's going to say, hey, wife me up, and I'm going to split half of my money with you? That doesn't really happen very much for men.
It's much less common.
Much less common, right? What's more common is just come to my house and be my toy for me, and that's great. But again, like, that 45-year-old woman's probably not going to have children for that 25-year-old man, as opposed to a young woman like Melania. When she met Donald Trump, he says, I want another child. She says, okay, I'll do that for you. Yeah. You give me another child and you break me off 20 million and we're good. We'll call it a deal.
So that brings up the other thing I just remembered. I remember the other thing I was going to mention, which was nowadays, though, the other factor to kind of keep in mind is fertility. So nowadays, so it used to be 45 for women was, basically the odds of miscarrying and the odds of, not being able to carry a child to term just like dropped off a cliff. Yeah. But nowadays they are sort of mitigating that.
Yes.
And especially in the coming decades, they may even be able to wipe that out so that, like, women can have babies into their, safely. Like, the average woman will be able to have women safely, without having to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
like into their 50s and 60s or whatever. It might take that sort of discrepancy between men and women. It might remove that, which might affect the whole boy toy, options and
Possibly,
and maybe
possibly.
career.
I think
This that
possibly.
might. And what's interesting is that might. I'm curious to see how that, if that technology becomes widely available, if that does affect the psychology of people and those gender roles. Because if it is tied to the biological imperative of like, okay, women only have this window, so they have to, they have to think about relationships more or family more. I'm wondering if you remove that obstacle or that restriction, if it will level the playing field across the board, where women
I'm not
can start a
sure.
family anytime they want.
I'm not sure that it would. As a matter of
I'm
fact,
curious.
I
it's
think
it's
I
interesting
think
though.
what
I'm
would might
curious about
happen.
that.
I think what might happen is women will just put it off longer. If you know that you can have a healthy baby at 45, you might say, you know what, I'm going to work all the way through my 30s and come through at 45 and do it, right?
Right.
I would imagine that it would push child rearing ages back, maybe as late as possible, right? So
Which
I,
I mean,
I
again,
can see that.
that's where men are at, right? That's where men, you get whatever. Like you
And
see
also
these again, you see a
there's
lot of
that
these career
issue of
men
there's that issue
in
of
their
if you
60s
are,
and 70s having children when they're.
yes,
Well,
but again, we're 40, we're our mid 40s, right? Well, you're
yeah.
married, so it's not fair for you to answer this question, but let's say that you're a single guy at 55. You want to single guy 55. You want to have a
Okay.
child with the 45-year-old or a 25-year-old?
I'm a bit of an odd case because, like, I think I've always sort of been attracted to older women.
Okay.
So, but
What
but I think
the average
if
guy would?
yeah, I think the average dude would definitely go for a younger gal. Um, but you could also be playing the specific numbers too, because like if you're, but in terms of like a healthy child or whatever, um, but yeah, if you take all those stigmas away, yeah, I don't know. Like I think it depends on what your goal is too, because
Yeah.
it's just like the other part that I think is interesting, as long as we're talking about that kind of thing, is uh, yeah, the thing that I'm encountering now, one of the biggest sort of quandaries, I guess, in my own mind is like, who am I going to be as my child grows up? Because I had a kid relatively late in life, so basically my kid's 3 years old. I had him in my 40s, right,
Yeah.
my early 40s, and so by the time he's, you know, by the time like in 10 years, when he's wanting to probably run around and play sports and stuff, like I don't know how much he's going to be able to play with his old man because I will literally be an old man. you know like
Yeah.
so, and I'm thinking like, man, when he's in, because I remember when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I remember playing tennis with my dad. I'm just like, by the time my kid is old enough to play decent tennis, like
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be able to. I probably won't be able to be much of a challenge to.
Well, but
to
there are always trade-offs. And we could go back to the article. We could go back to our individual situations. Like my situation, like when I married my wife or whatever you want to call it now, like I remember one of the things that was driving me was that idea you're talking about right now. I was in my mid 30s and I was thinking, do I want to have a child when I'm in my 40s where the
yeah,
child is like a 3-year-old and I'm 41, right? Or later. So when I met my current, I don't know, whatever you can call my current wife, like that
your
was
baby
we
mama.
well, I mean, technically we're you know how that works. Marriage is complex,
Yeah.
but but one of the things I was thinking about is that there are certain things that I want to do with a child, and I would like to get those things started as soon as I possibly can, right?
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
mean, even like you're talking about tennis, right? I remember, I mean, now it would be almost 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I'd pick up my daughter from the childcare, and we have a few extra minutes before I went to do some stuff, you teach my lesson at night, and we go to the park and hit tennis balls, right? And so like this little 3-year-old little girl watching the ball and hitting it with a tennis racket, and that's just something I really wanted to do as a father. And now I just take her to tennis, sit down and watch her, smash the ball, right? But
You're playing tennis with her at 3?
not playing with her. I was like bouncing balls and letting her hit them into the gate.
Oh my
like
gosh.
so like I can volley with her now, but
I need to get started, huh?
yeah, why not?
I need to get my boy started.
But the point is that even for me at 35, I knew that I wanted to get the ball rolling as soon as I possibly could. And I think my current wife, I think she felt the same way. Like,
Sure.
Time is running out if I want to have a family. Because again, you think about the cons to a woman being able to have a child in her mid 40s, a 47-year-old woman breastfeeding is not a simple thing to do, right? Like carrying a 47-year-old woman carrying around a 1.5-year-old child that doesn't want to go into go into the nursery school, or carrying them around Disney World because they're sleepy, like little things like that. Like sometimes I see young women carrying these large children. I'm like, you gotta be tired. Like, how can you not be tired? That would make me tired. And it's just something about, I guess, motherhood that like they can pick up a 40-kilogram child and carry it for half an hour. Like, yeah, this is what we do. I'm like, but that part of motherhood, like you're still 40, you're still 45, you're still 50, and you still have a little child that wants to be carried and breastfed and all of these things that require a lot of energy, right? So how does a 40 plus some odd mother do that versus one in her 20s or 30s? That's an issue that's there also, right?
So to kind of switch gears a little bit, like, no, I totally agree, but like, I think that's definitely an important factor. But to sort of switch gears a bit, I'm curious about what are the things that are necessary to separate the genders on, because I can understand physical differences between men and women, so that there's a women's game.
Well,
and a
separate.
men's game.
Separate. What do you mean separate?
So like, there is a division for. So, I guess I don't know. Like, you're not going to see women in the NBA, right? And like fighters, you're not going to see like women MMA fighters against male MMA fighters.
But this is a very tricky spot here, because then you get into the transgender part, right? Because you're starting to see this in male sports, and there's not a pushback yet, but a pushback is inevitable, right? You're having these transgender high school athletes compete as girls, and they're destroying everyone. They're running faster, right? They're playing sports better. They're wrestling better. So these women are these born females can't compete with transition females. So what's possible, there might be the first transgender in WNBA player, right? And then you might start seeing dunking in the WNBA, because if you're having a 6'4", 6'6" man what do you call it? Transition into being a female. She's a female on paper, but that anatomy that they were born with is male anatomy, male testosterone levels, male physique.
Their body developed.
Yes,
to a
they're
certain
developed
extent
as a man. So even if they're taking the hormones, right, they're still going to have an advantage athletically over women that were born female. So
Right.
you might see that might be a byproduct of some of this is more transgender athletes, because you see the woman Cyborg, I think her name is.
The fighter, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think she transitioned. I'm not sure, but if a man transitioned into women's MMA, that is a stark contrast. You can see that contrast. Like, you can make rules and say you have to have transition for 2 years, whatever, but hey, if I'm a man, which would you rather fight? Would you rather fight a traditional woman or a transition woman? Like, if you're a female, which would you rather fight? A born woman or a transition woman? Like, both of those, in both of those cases, you're going to say, I would want to fight the traditional person, because I'd rather fight a woman than a man, right? Or used to, gosh, how do you navigate this? A woman or a person that used to be a man, or a person who changed to be a female, or however you explain that, right?
Right.
So I think you're going to start seeing more of that. You're seeing it in high school now. Go ahead.
So that's the tricky thing too. Well, I actually wasn't anticipating going down that avenue, but now that you've mentioned it, I feel like now it's, it goes back into this idea of creating constructs in order to dismantle them later. It's like maybe another categories is will be necessary, where it's like you don't just have male versus female, but you actually have to have like a trans division of these sort of athletic contests.
Well, but that would be discrimination, wouldn't it? By definition, wouldn't it be?
Well, I mean, but I feel like, again, this is for legislators to decide, or lawyers, or smarter people to decide.
I do not envy ultimately that job.
But the thing is, if you're dealing with specific, it's almost like, like why make divisions for weights, for example, like heavyweight versus, welterweight versus middleweight versus featherweight, like there are divisions based on those physical differences. Why not? Again, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor, so I won't be able to make those lines. But the thing is, it's like, you either, on the one hand, you can either just unlock it all and just say, like, look, you have this big spectrum between men and women, and trans is somewhere in the middle. Then you just open it all up. Okay, all right, everyone, you can fight each other, and we'll figure out who comes out on top. Or you have to create divisions, because because I feel like trans people don't fit into, like you said, these divisions.
And that I think that's a limit. Oh, I saw this article yesterday, popped up on my phone. It said that Tokyo Disney, right? Mm-hmm. They're no longer going to start their announcements with hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. They're just going to simply say hello, everyone.
Really?
Yes, that was 2 days ago. But I think you're seeing, and this is one reason why I really enjoy living in Japan, and I appreciate Japan, is because some of the social conventions that they have, although they may not seem fair, or they may not make the most sense to me, some of these conventions have been tested over hundreds and thousands of years. Like, this is a way that you act. This is a way that you speak. This is a way that you're this is an expectation that is. And it's very easy to come along and say, I don't agree with any of this. I want to rip it up.
Can you give me an example?
Well, okay. So it's built into language. Let's think of an example. When I'm speaking about my boss, right? I'm not even speaking.
Sure. You're talking about the honorifics in the language.
Yeah, I'm not even speaking to him. I'm speaking to someone about my boss. There is a certain set of language that I use that shows that I'm showing that person a level of an appropriate level of respect, right?
Yeah.
And when you learn that as an American, you realize that there are several levels of society that not only are protected, but they are expected to be protected because of some things that I don't even understand about Japan yet. And
Sure.
because of that structure, it reminds people that, hey, this is the way things work, and there's a hierarchy, and because of the hierarchy, people know where they fit in, and this kind of social organization allows our society to somewhat remain intact as it is moving forward. So the question for me becomes, what happens when you rip all of it down? What do you build in its place? Because you have to build something. And that's one thing I think is an issue in America right now is you take all of the manliness and this testosterone masculinity out of it, right? Let's just say that men and women are equal, boom, period. You have to build a new hierarchy in its place. And the question is, what is that hierarchy and how do you build it and maintain it? Because the old hierarchy, people might not like it, but it has function. Like the father makes decisions about what the daughter does, the mom stays home, does XYZ, the sons do XYZ, the grandparents act this way. This kind of hierarchy has been there. And for what we've known, it's function. So if you wipe all of that out and everyone's equal, mom's equal to dad, and mom can work 80 hours and dad can work 80 hours, and the kids come home and they have a nanny, whatever you want to say, what do you replace the hierarchy with? Because when you're a 5-year-old boy, you want to look up to someone and say, I want to be that person. When you're a 5-year-old girl, you're going to look up to someone and say, I want to be that person. That's just the inevitability of teaching. You know that. So what is it that those kids are going to be wanting to become? Because they're going to want to become something. So, of course, if you want to be the world's best soccer player, you want to be president, that's great. But 100 girls look up and say, I want to be president. One of those girls may become president. The other 99 women are going to become some other block of society. The question is, what block of it? And do the same for boys. 100 boys say, I want to be president. One boy becomes president. What happens to the other 99 boys? Where do they fit in society? And if you knock down all of the society, you have to rebuild it. Those kids are kind of figuring out rules as they go. Like, what's the rule here? How am I supposed to interact with people here? Like that's got to be really confusing. It's confusing for me. How do you treat women? Like, are you super nice gentlemen? Are you super respectful? Are you arrogant alpha guy? Which one do they want? What kind of women? Who do they treat with respect? Those rules are fluid, and they're fluid now more than they ever have been. And I think what you're seeing a lot with people in the current dating market is that although the rules have changed, women still kind of want what their father and grandfather was. There's kind of a longing for that. Go.
Well, there's always, I mean, the thing is, like, okay, so I think you also have to deal with 3 specific sort of psychological issues, which is, I think the number one is to kind of quote Adam Carolla, is no one likes going backwards, right? No one likes to be demoted in any capacity. So no one wants to ever give up rights or give up privileges. You only want to add stuff. So yeah, so basically, like, that adjustment that you're talking about, it's going to be tough because if some people perceive like they have to give something up, then it's going to be difficult unless they're getting something else in return, and that's going to be very complex, you know. The second thing, though, is I feel like you have to also differentiate between like practical divisions and emotional divisions and, you know, different types of divisions. Because, so for example, on the one hand, it might be practical to just say, like, look, let's just take genders off of resumes and you know, whatever, take no photos, let's just make it all blind, and whoever whoever applies for this job will get it and get this salary, et cetera, et cetera. That could be a practical thing. But then maybe, like you said, when maybe some other things like that might be more social, might be more emotional, where it's like, look, I don't want to refer to you with this pronoun, or I want to, or maybe like you said, I want to treat women like ladies, or like the long, whatever, chivalry, or the women and children, again, like the Dilbert ladies and gentlemen, Disney thing. But just like there are those sort of social conventions that are just like, okay, well, you want to be a gentleman. Can I still be a gentleman? That kind of thing, which is more not super practical, but just kind of like this social thing, or just and then like all that other stuff. So like you have to figure out like, okay, well, do you do it? Are you talking about all those things, or are you only talking about the practical things, or are you only talking about certain ones of these divisions? Well, and then so go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just try to imagine how complex it is for if I were a 13-year-old boy right now, like I would not know how to talk to girls. Like I simply would not know how to approach the girls. Should I approach a girl? How do you interact with girls? Like, are we equal? Do you want me to be masculine? Do you want me to be like, if I say something wrong to you, is it a Me Too thing? Like you're having all of these social constructs, and they're all fluid. So you're a 13-year-old boy, and you're in a class. You see a 13-year-old girl that you like. Do you walk up to her and pull her hair? Like, the 13 is too old for that. Like, let's say 8. You run up and pull her hair, or push her and kick her and say, "You're a big fatty," or do you say, "Oh, your hair is so beautiful today"? Or like when we were kids, it was more defined. We knew, okay, at 8, it's okay to do this. At 15, it's okay to do this. At 20, it's okay to do this. So
it's tricky, right? So I guess like in some respects it's easier, and in some respects it's harder, right? Because the short answer, as you're describing that scenario, is it's always tough as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I feel like it could be as simple as, if you like someone, you can tell them that you like them, And then if you want to get a little bit cruder, then it's just like, you can add in the element or the dimension of sexuality. Because the thing is, for again, when I was growing up, the given was you're heterosexual. So like the language was such that if you like a girl, then you should ask her out. And so, I didn't have to evaluate whether I was just like, man, am I sexually attracted to this girl, or am I sexually attracted to this guy? Like, that was never really an issue for me, because I just assumed the default for me was I'm into chicks. And it just happened to be that I was into chicks, despite, whatever trial and error or whatever.
Remember now, like when we were in school, homecoming queen, homecoming king, boy, girl. Mm-hmm. But now you're having kids, prom queen, the prom queen is a guy and the prom king is a woman, and you're looking at really? This, and this is like, of course this is happening in America. Like if you're a kid in your school and you see that the prom queen is a boy that's gay, and the prom or better yet, the prom king is a woman or girl, and the prom queen is a woman, and it's just 2 women up there or 2 men up there. Like, how do you process that? Like you're looking, it's like, so there's no difference. Like, how do you process that? So for us, we were, I guess, lucky because we had the structure to kind of say, hey, my daughter, I want you to be this kind of girl, and you want you to marry this kind of boy. But we have a generation behind us that my child is transitioning, or my 13-year-old is thinking of transitioning, and we're in the process of transitioning him to her, or stuff like that. Like, that's happening now.
The biggest thing, though, so the immediate thing with regard to what you're talking about is there's a big difference between having to deconstruct preconceived,
Yeah,
structures, as opposed to whatever developing something from scratch.
that's right.
So I think, like, for a lot of what you're talking about, the hard part is not accepting, to like, it's basically like, to a young kid, if one of your friends has two dads, that's just something that happens in the
That's
world.
right. That's
If
right.
one of your friends has two moms, that's just something that happens in the world, right?
Mhm.
So for like young kids, certain things like two prom kings or whatever, if that's just how it's introduced to you, you just sort of accept it, you know, at face value. Like, it's not confusing per se. It's only confusing if you were someone who previously only believed or have been taught a different way, and then you encounter something that runs counter
Yeah.
to what you've already sort of established in your mind as convention, or as something that's supposed to be how it is. So that, to me, is part of the difficulty, is figuring out, as a society, figuring out what are the things that are just naturally going to kind of make sense to people without interruption, and then what are the things that we have to build constructs in order to sort of help people to think in the quote unquote right way, or you know what I'm saying? Like as
Well,
far as,
I'm actually a little bit curious about this. You've lived in China.
yeah,
How is this happening in China?
like the whole sort
Like
of,
kind of
in
like
terms of gender fluidity, that kind of
well,
thing.
gender fluidity, and women pressing for more equal rights, and men, I don't, what's the gender dynamic being somewhat challenged, or this is happening in some form or fashion there, isn't it?
So yes and no. So basically, when I was living in China, it's kind of similar to what's happening in Korea, where basically, if you are gay, or if you are anything except for, so in China, most things are, as a society, are in very specific boxes, right? Men are men, women are women, right? And if you deviate from that, you are destroyed, you are gone, you are erased, right? If you're gay, you're gone, you don't exist. If you are like trans or whatever, like all that stuff is like, again, this is back from when I was there.
Yeah.
It could be different now. And like, if you are into a religion, underground, right? It only exists, like, it has to be secret, because as far as the society goes, it doesn't really exist. And so, like, most people that I talk to uh, either laughed at the notion that gay people existed, or were staunchly anti, but without any real reason, just
Yeah.
because they were sort of indoctrinated in that regard. Um, I don't think, I don't know, did I meet any gay people while I was there? I can't, in China, I didn't meet it. I don't think I met any gay people, but the bigger thing that the bigger sort of underground group that I
Christian?
encountered were religious people.
Yeah, Christian.
So I met like Catholics and Christians and stuff that were operating in China, and they're just like, if we're caught, we're in big trouble, you know? And I was just like, okay, so they can't, so in general, they couldn't practice, you know, religion, but they kind of had their own, but it was all secret, because the overall society was very strict in terms of what was acceptable and what was not. And most people fell into those boxes.
Yeah.
And in the cases where of course it did exist, like you said, it does exist, but it has to exist in secret, and a lot of it is like, there's a lot of shame, and there's a lot of whatever, there's a lot of sort of guilt or whatever about it, and it's very hidden. And that's the same thing in Korea, where, again, very similarly, like, I think society as a whole, very strict about boxes and definitions.
Yeah.
But in the case of Korea, there's a very robust underground, like, gay and trans and, like, that scene in Korea. And so I don't know how influential it is, but it's kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream. And it's interesting how it's sort of permeating through pop culture, because to me, when you look at BTS, it's like those guys are super, like, I feel like they're like the poster children for like gender fluidity. It's like, you know, because the guys are all made like but the weirdest thing is I don't think it started that way. I think the standard of beauty shifted because men were wearing makeup in Korea for a long time. And I feel like they just sort of became more effeminate,
Yeah.
you know, until it got to the point where a sexy man looks just like a sexy woman in Korea. And so I'm just like, and then I think that was frankly, I don't know for sure, but I feel like that was co-opted by the sort of gender fluid movement outside of Korea. So they're just like, hey, look at these guys. Because the weird thing is, if you talk to a lot of these guys who look like women, they are a lot of times super masculine and super, like, in terms of the way that they behave, maybe are ultra conservative and ultra like you would not expect a lot of the views from these guys that look so woman-like and are super like whatever into like makeup and stuff like that. But if you talk to them, they may be like ultra conservative or ultra like male. And and so I feel like part of it has been co-opted just because of the
Well,
physicality of
but
it.
I think
And it may have evolved since then, so that they've adopted like the sort of everyone is okay and whatever you want to believe, like sexually or whatnot. But then there's another factor in terms of Korea that's another factor to kind of throw in, is that because of how regimented the education system is, a lot of kids or a lot of young people are fairly they don't really think critically very often, and so they're actually quite innocent in their thinking. So a lot of times they're not even thinking about sexuality. They're not even thinking about those things in any great depth because they've never had to. So what you'll find is even these young people, they only think about it as looking pretty or looking good. They're not even thinking about their own sexuality in that regard. And so,
but I would say that comparing the two, and the one reason I wanted to ask you about that is because of course I don't know about China, but also I know that like what is it that's the most exciting thing to do when you're a teenager? Is what your parents tell you that you can't, right?
Yeah,
so,
not to do, right?
So when you have a society where this is the norm and this is what you're expected to do, and you choose to do something different, there's something special in that, right? Like you can feel like, this is me and I'm expressing myself through this way, and so in a way those boxes help you express yourself. When there aren't any boxes, what happens? Like, do you try and break through boxes that haven't been broken through yet? So
the thing is, it's like, but if you're like, what boxes are you talking about? Because if you're talking specifically about,
just think like this. We're seeing boxes being broken now that our grandparents could not have foreseen, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So certainly there's going to be things that happen with our children that we can't foresee, whatever those things might be. We can't even imagine them, really. But I mean, my mother, she never thought she'd see a black president, and that's just having a black president. Like, I mean, we might have. I can't speculate. Like, we're going to see things that we never could have imagined. I mean, try to imagine an elementary school child being transitioning and that becoming a national story, and they're making a movie out of it, or being a reality show. Like, I'm just trying to think of something that's so out of our ability to recognize as being maybe the most popular thing in media. Like, that's quite possible. Give it 10 or 15 years, right? Like, oh, this is the story of so and such transitioning at 4 years old, and it's the most popular show on television. Or just something that we can't imagine, because after these boxes open where, okay, we can be free and transgender, then there's going to be another box.
Well, to me, and this might be overly simplistic, I feel like the sexuality aspect of the sexuality box is totally arbitrary and sort of like whatever. Like, I feel like it's not super important.
It's not. I agree with you there.
Because like basically like, you know, let's just imagine whatever. I want to have, I want my kid to have 2 penises and, you know, or whatever, you know, like I, you know, or, you know, XX, XXY, YYX, whatever permutations of like crazy something. Like, you know what, I want a hermaphrodite child. I don't want any genitalia on my child. Yeah. And that's how I'm going to program my child to be. I can do that, you know, whatever. And then that child decides what, and I won't even have, you know, we'll start out hermaphrodite. And then when that child's of age, they decide what gender they want to be based on their experience. Like, who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. I honestly, like, I would, like, for me, it's like, it doesn't matter at all. It won't affect my life at all. You know, but it does sort of make some, like you said, some of like the social things a little bit more confusing in terms of like,
well, what it does is I can have any rule that I want to inside of my house, right? Like, sure, I have my own rules in my house. But when you have a greater society or community and you try to establish rules, like, that's when it gets really tricky, right? That's when you have that's when you have the boy that's transitioning running against girls, or that's when you have the like certain person using certain bathrooms. And so that's that's
right. When you start looking at that's where I'm talking about, when it goes into the practical land, where it's like, okay, and again, I'm sort of in a larger respect and in a speculative mode, I can say I don't care. Mm-hmm. But if I have a daughter and then transition girl beats out my child for a scholarship spot, you know,
that's when
she's technically a girl,
yeah,
and she gets a, you know, higher education than my kid can get, then maybe that's going to piss me off, because I'm like, hey man, like, what happened? Like, so like I said, it's hard for me to speculate on that regard, but I feel like if it's like, I feel like it's like most things, it's like if as long as, in my mind, as long as the system itself makes sense or is fair, or not necessarily fair but consistent, right? It may be unfair, but as long as like it's unfair for everybody, or if it's just like, but like, or it's so like, for me, that's the part that's important. Like, for like the most annoying thing for me is when there's some sort of weird arbitrary bias, you know, and that doesn't make sense. It's like, look, as long as if something sucks, but it just kind of sucks in a uniform way, then I'm just like, all right.
Well, and this is where it's helpful to go back to the article, because the NCAA system does not suck. Okay. It does not suck, especially for women's sports. And this is where the brouhaha over the equal pay for the women in the men's tournament comes into play. There are 2 or 3 sports that the NCAA has that fund all of the other ones.
Like all the other
sports, so if you want to like take that money and you want to equalize women's basketball, that money is going to come out of other sports. And so again, wrecking the system is the easy part. It's easy to say this system is wrong, tear it down. But then you have to build a new system that works. And that's the hard part. And to build a system, you have to have rules. You have to have some structure. You can't build a house without a framework. So if the framework so far has been separate the boys or the men and the women this way, we're going to separate, get the most popular sports for women, the most popular sports for men, try and use those sports to fund the other sports. But when you get to a situation where the men's sports are funding women's sports so that women can have the same amount of, whatever you access, whatever for basketball, that money is going to come out of some other sport, most likely another men's sport or women's sport. We don't know. So the real question is, how do you fix the system to be fair without totally destroying how the system works as is? Because again, because that's how the NCAA is able to have rowing at 250 schools. They're able to have golf at 300 schools, because some of that money is coming from Division I football and men's basketball, right?
But so that's the thing. So for me, and again, like, I feel like this is the major sort of distinction that needs to be made, is that this is, if as long as the system makes sense, it's not necessarily about equality, like, if you're saying that, because I feel like this is one of the straw man arguments that come from a lot of these sort of equality debates, is that if I work as hard, if I do the same job that someone else does, I should get equal pay. This idea of I deserve XYZ. It's like, you know what? Like, or actually, no. I think a better example is, if I work all day, then I should be paid as much as someone else who works all day, kind of thing. If I put 10 hours in, then I should also get 10 hours, then that person got 10 hours in, then we should have the same, we should get compensated the same. It's like, no, if that person gets a lot more done in that 10 hours,
so
then
that's the issue right there.
That's different, right? And I feel like that's where that's kind of a straw man that a lot of people kind of talk about, where it's just like, look, we're playing the same sport, then we should be getting paid the same amount. It's just like, actually, the value that this person's getting back is worth more than the value that you are getting back.
Or better yet, what I was saying earlier about part of being a man or being masculine or whatever is no excuses. Did you get the job done?
Sure.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Your job is to go on television and play an exciting brand of basketball, and you're going to get a scholarship for it.
Yeah.
And you'll get a couple of guys that'll say, it's not fair. We should get paid for this because of how much money the NCAA is making. But you don't see male student athletes sitting on the floor protesting. They just say, hey, this is just the way it is. We're going to go out there and play. That's what it is. Boom, let's go. Right? Like go ahead.
Well, something else that is also another straw man, which is kind of a dangerous, which is also kind of dangerous. I don't know if this is what's happening here, but this argument of like the men versus women could also be kind of it could be the wrong argument, like the NCAA might just be exploiting all of its athletes, and so but creating this artificial like men versus women.
I would agree with that, but it's kind of if the NCAA is exploiting anyone, they're exploiting Black athletes, Black ones.
So
I mean, that's so, but simply because of, just simply because tennis, you can go pro at 15. Hockey, you can go pro whenever. You can go pro baseball out of high school. But basketball, you must go to college. You have to go. And if you want to play football, you have to go to college for 3 years. So all of these tippity top guys, even Maurice Claret, he challenged and he lost because he's going up against the NFL. He has no chance. So if someone is losing, it's inner city black kids who could use financial access as soon as they finish high school. So, but that's, yes, go ahead. You were saying.
Sure. Well, I mean, they're going to get there. Hopefully, I heard. I mean, aren't they going to start? Student athletes are going to start getting paid, or they're going to be. They open that up.
Well, I don't know if they're going to allow. I don't know if they're going to get them
their
paid, but they're going to allow them to make money off of their likeness.
Right. Exactly. To monetize their likenesses or whatever, their brands or whatever.
That's right. Exactly.
Which is it's a step in the right direction. But what I was going to say is that like, it would be unfortunate if like the creating this rift of men versus women, and inequality between men and women distracts from where what other issues that might actual because the men and women thing might not be a thing, but there might be some genuine inequity that needs to be corrected within the system that could be basically swept away because of the hubbub behind like, oh, look at the gym facilities for the women's for the women's team looks like a high school gym versus this high-tech facility for the men's whatever, and then which is a non-issue versus like maybe some actual, like you said, like this weird the weird like college practices that like the NCAA being able to reap all this money from television deals that never go to any of the athletes.
No, it doesn't. NCAA prints money, especially this time of year.
And so like basically, to me, I feel like it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, if you're a girl, if you want to be a professional basketball player, you're not going to be making 7-figure contracts or 8-figure contracts. It's like, but you can make a living, or you might have to still work at Costco, but
Mike, again, look at the flip side of that, and this is the flip side of that is the case, and it's possibly has been the case for as long as human evolution, right? Maybe you cannot go and make 21 or as a 21-year-old woman or 23-year-old woman and make what men can make in basketball. But how many male swimsuit models at 22 do you know that can make $150,000 a year by posting fitted photos on Instagram and on
Sure. So it's about finding the right. Yeah, it's like that's the part
there, right? So
it's finding the inefficiencies.
Well, yeah, you have one extreme where I want to be a basketball player and make what pro men's basketball players are making, but on the other end of the spectrum, struggling college dude that doesn't have any money to eat can't go on OnlyFans, take his shirt off, and make $20,000 a month. He can't do that, but there are some people that can do that, and
sure.
So it's again, that's why it's so complex to just say we should all get the same thing across the board. Because if you're a guy in college, you would say, "Well, I want some of that OnlyFans money. How can I get into that? Like, let me pay for college by being a stripper."
That's the idea that I was saying before about like, what do I deserve? Yes. What do I deserve versus what do I earn? Right. So if you're in the camp of what do I deserve, then good luck, right? Good luck, male OnlyFans guy who wants to who's waiting for that paycheck. Like, it's not gonna happen. Or maybe it will, maybe you get surgery and get some boobs, get the, maybe you look like you can get the trans surgery, whatever. But then and then versus, okay, where if my goal is to make as much to maximize the money that I can get, where are the inefficiencies? What are the skills? What are the areas? And that's where you take into account where, okay, if I love basketball, you know what, the big money's in the NBA, but the WNBA, it's an option, but it's not because of the, just because it's less popular, it earns less money. I'm not going to be able to get paid that much, right? So it's just like, it's about like, as long as it's sort of, like I said, as long as it's merit based, as long as there isn't some sort of shady thing where the NBA, because the thing is, I feel like, and I could be wrong, I feel like the NBA is doing all it can to support the WNBA. It's not like the
I think
NBA
they're doing as best as they can.
it's not like the NBA is trying to bury the WNBA.
No.
Like, I feel like the NBA is trying very hard to support the WNBA. So, I can't speak for, I guess, the soccer teams. I don't think that the NCAA is trying to undercut the women's soccer team, but yeah, like it may just be the situation where, like, look, the resources are coming in because of the men's game or because of some other, somewhere else, and it's just they're just working with the actual numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that makes, like I said, that makes sense to me. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Well, I would say that I would also say that maybe the biggest beneficiary to NCAA is, or the biggest beneficiary of the NCAA is most likely fringe
Coaches.
Sports, right? Well, have you ever seen the map that shows like the highest public employee in each state? Have you ever seen that map? There's basically a map.
I see where you're going.
Yeah, that shows like in each state who's the highest paid public or whatever. And like, some of the more progressive states, it's either governors or it's like professors or it's their politicians, right? But you go in the South and they're all football coaches. College football coaches, right? Like certainly, like
the college football coaches,
they're making them
crazy bank.
Well, think about college football. Think about what happens to these athletic associations. They have money pouring in, and they have to spend it and give it to everyone except the players. So they have these coffers overflowing. So some of that money, of course, is going back to the school and it's going to coaches and facilities. But you have places like my college, Georgia, or one of my two colleges, Georgia. It's like a spigot. There's just money just bursting out of it, and like people are picking up in buckets and like, oh my god, we need to repaint the weight room in 3D colors or something, right? Like, how many times can you expand the workout facility and add press boxes and renew the stadium? There's too much money, right? And so, of course, some of that money is going to help other sports and whatnot. But hey, I mean, if you're looking at things and saying, why don't we make as much money as the football team? Like, do you want to get rid of the football team? Because that's the bread and butter for a lot of programs on the campus. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's So I mean. Yeah, it's a complex issue because like there's a part of me that's just like, yes, like let's dismantle some of these. Like there's an unhealthy obsession with a lot of these athletic programs.
Well, when you explain how college athletics works in America, you're like, they're not getting paid. Like that's foreign to people overseas. Like, Luka Doncic, right?
Yeah.
Like he was a pro player at 13. He was getting paid to play basketball as a junior high school kid. So imagine what that would do for American families coming from the poorest of poor areas and having an opportunity to bring in income as an early teenager. That would reform communities.
Well, speaking of though, like that's the thing. Like that's another sort of that's another construct that is being redefined in the current age, because you're looking at YouTube stars, you're looking at, because back in the day it was like, we need to protect children from child labor and exploitation, but then it's like that was the spirit of it. And same thing, like preserving amateur athletes
Yeah.
That was like the theory back in the day, but yeah, that's total nonsense now. But like, but yeah, but you're looking at, we're in the age now where you have a child. I think like the highest paid YouTuber, highest is a child, has been a child for like the past like 3 years.
You're
It's
talking
been
about Ryan.
it's
You're
that
talking about Ryan's World.
Ryan's World or whatever. I don't know what his like. I don't know too much about him, but like I know of him, and you know he makes a ton of money, and he's a child, and and maybe there's some sort of weird workaround where it's actually like his parents' company or who knows, but but he's doing the work, right? And
He's more like he's the star, but yeah.
he's the star, but like same thing. It's like basically if you see a lot of like reality TV, YouTube vids, a lot of the production, like these, a lot of the people that are involved. That's work. It's a job,
Yeah.
And weirdly, they are being, I don't know, again, the evolution of it is still, it's still a gray area right now, but like, yeah, you see a lot of these kids are still being exploited. You can some of the weird like B-roll or whatever you see, like some of these
Oh yeah.
or accidental uploads of clips of people beating up their pets and beating up their children, or yelling, on the in the background or whatever. um but that's the thing. It's like this weird balance we're having to reevaluate.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, children, yes, there's this aspect that, if you're able to earn money, if you can be a professional, then and you're doing work, you should be able to earn money. But then there is an aspect of just, we need to protect people that cannot protect
Yeah.
themselves, right?
That's one of the reasons why I really respect the East, is because some things you don't do just because it's best not to do them.
Sure.
Now there's not a law against it, and maybe it's just frowned upon, but in thousands of years of people living and experiencing social norms, people have just come to say these are things that is best not to do, and we would prefer you not do them, and we'll look down on you if you do those things, because some things are very difficult to legislate, right? You can't make a law saying you can't do this, you can't do this for some stuff. So when you have social norms, and like we were talking earlier about maybe just women getting married younger, right? Maybe some of those social norms are coming from older women who have seen what's happened to women that waited to marry, and they waited and they never got hitched to someone, and they never had a family, and some they probably know people or know of women who reached 50 and their biggest regret was the person that they didn't start a family with, right? So I'm not saying that that's 100% the reason for it, but what I am saying is that people that are older than us did things a certain way for a reason. So for us young people to come and say this is all wrong, just rip it all up, we got to do it our way because our way is the right way, in a way, yes, some of the things that we're thinking are better ways to improve on the past, but there have been generations of people before us doing things a certain way, and they did things that way for reasons that we don't yet understand at our age, that we will come to understand as we get older. So that's one thing I think is really important for societies in the East, because that structure, while it might seem like, oh, it's archaic and this is the new times, things have changed. Maybe things have changed, but there were inventions in the past when Gutenberg made that printing press and people started reading books. Like that was the internet, right? Like when they started showing like the talkies, that was the internet, right? So when they had color TV in every house, boom, internet again. So it seems like, oh, no one understand us like we understood the internet, but it's not true. Like the world has re- reinvented itself many times over with new inventions that totally changed the way we interacted with each other. Inside of that, there were still norms that grandparents would say, hey, even though you're seeing this on TV, it's best for you to do this. or this is the way we do it in our family and we have a reason for it. And you're 20, you don't get it. And then you're 40, you're like, now I get it. And so I think when you tear all of that stuff down and you say, okay, well, we're going to do it the proper way, like that give and take that's necessary. If you look over that, you run past that, then you get into trouble with going too far. And okay, how do you deal with less structure? Go ahead.
It's tricky though. I think that I think the I think what you're talking about only works if there is a sense of majority. Because I think the problem is that a lot of people, when you have groups of individuals or pockets of individuals or self-interests, then it's hard to move forward. Whereas if you can get enough agreement, because the thing is, you're never going to get everyone to agree. You're never going to get like 100% of people to be like, because the thing is like as you're talking, I'm just like, old people don't know anything. Like you're saying like, oh, like a 40-year-old person's going to be able to tell like a, whatever. It's like, actually, a lot of people don't know what they're talking about, especially the people that are making the decisions don't know what they're talking about, don't know what they're doing. So like for me, there's a part of me that was just like cringing. I'm like, man, I don't want to rely on some of these old people's decisions to, they're not passing down wisdom. Wisdom is not, inherent in age and inherent
No, it's
in,
not.
the whatever is old and tradition. Like there are a lot of traditions that are toxic. There are a lot of traditions that don't work and outdated or obsolete, So as much as I'd like to believe that experience always leads to better decisions, I think that you have to have the right mindset. And I think it has to be, the check against it is like a plurality at least. Like basically, you're looking at a large group of agreement, of relative agreement.
You saying that actually makes me worry about America because we don't do that. We're not good at that.
Exactly.
Like
And that's the
compromise
biggest
and
problem,
agreement, right? And because I think when I hear this kind of argument with Megan Rapone, right? She makes a valid argument. As a women's soccer player, we want better facilities. We want more for us. We want what the men have. But in negotiation, you always ask for more than you want, right? So we want what the men want. That's what that's our bargaining start. So, a bargainer comes into the room and says, well, we can't give you that, but this is what we can give you. And that's progress.
So yeah, I mean that's sort of my point, is that like, look, she's advocating for her sport, and she's advocating for her team and for other people that are in a similar situation. I fully respect that she's making the the request, but I don't think it should be honored. Like I think it should be listened to and it should be considered, but I don't think it should be honored. Like I feel like it, based on what I'm seeing and based on how, like if I were in charge, then I would be like, nope. But thanks for asking.
And Mike, and this is one of the underlying issues, not just being a male, but being a minority, is that we are not defined by our ethnicity. We are defined by our performance. So you know just as well as I do, especially working overseas as a foreign language teacher, there's a certain level of there's a certain standard that we have to meet that some of our counterparts do not have to meet. We know that, right? Like some of the stories that you hear from the guys and what they get away with because they have some attributes that we don't have. Our burden of performance is clear. We can't show up late a couple of days in a row and be like, just shrug it off. We can't do stuff like that. Right. So in a way, women, I believe, are going to have to kind of accept that part of it and
Suck it
say,
up.
well, not just suck it up, but like, hey, look, we have to do more to belong into the room. We accept it until we can get our own. Then we get our own and we run it as we see fit, right?
Well, but the thing is, that is we're, again, it's funny that you mentioned this because that is economics. That is
Yep.
the mechanism.
Yep.
Because basically, if you look at, take the example of me, use myself as an example. All right. So the system, like you said, there's discrimination against me. So it's more difficult. Circumstances are more difficult for me to excel in my area of work
Mm-hmm.
than it is for the other people. So the way that I compensate is by working harder
Mm-hmm.
and by becoming better, becoming more proficient, and getting my chances and taking advantage of the chances I do have. And then I'm able to succeed. I'm able to actually, carve out a small success for myself. If, but then along that same timeline, I get comfortable, I get lazy, I start being late, I start doing stuff, I start slipping, and I collapse. So like that's the system where it's like you start out as the underdog, you develop and you create a value for yourself. You're able to, you get to a point where you maybe plateau, and then if you do, then you come back down, like that's sort of the machine, and then that cycle maybe perpetuates until maybe next time you rise even higher and are less lazy, and then you try, maybe you learn from your mistakes, and then maybe you fall into it again, and then you fall again. That's sort of the mechanism. So like I feel
Yeah,
like,
that's what you have to basically earn what you get. That's
yeah,
it. Like,
yeah,
you want it,
exactly.
you got
And
to go
so,
earn it.
but it's within that system because ultimately, I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like inherent in the example that I'm giving is that if women suddenly got overpaid, then I feel like they're not going to behave any more differently than the assuming her premise is correct, and that men are keeping women down and are trying to artificially create this inequality. Like, most likely, if the situation were flipped, it would probably be very similar. Like, if it just happened to be the circumstances were that the women's facilities were making more money or whatever, it would be just as arbitrary ultimately, and then it would be in the same
Well,
the same
but
situation.
but again, you don't have to look further than the black community to see how economics responds to that. When black people couldn't go to school, could go to higher education in America, we built our own colleges. When black people couldn't play in the major leagues, they built the Negro leagues. Like that, like you build the Negro leagues, and then the 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 major league is like, oh whoa, who's this Josh Gibson guy? Who Satchel Paige? Who is that? Jackie Robinson? Oh wow, he's good. You know what?
So I want to put a pin in this because I want to talk about. So there's something I've been thinking about for years that I wanted to throw out, and it's this idea that, specifically with the NBA, okay, you have the NBA, you've got all these athletes that are incredibly wealthy, right? I feel like they're hitting the tipping point of, and again, this is kind of a crazy idea. Why don't why don't the players in the NBA just start a league, their own league? Why don't they cut all the owners out?
Well, I think
Because
I think
because I feel like they've hit the tipping point where they could rent stadiums,
yes, they can do
or
that.
they could, create their own teams, create their own infrastructure for tickets and sales and all this stuff. They could take the whole pie, like why are they doing the whole collective bargaining? Why are
Well,
they
but
doing
but
any of
I
that
I
stuff?
think I think again we were talking earlier about building a system as opposed to using a system. Like
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work to build a system, right? So ideally, you're right. You're right. But what you would have to have along with building the system is a lot of support among rank and file stars that
Well, they would all have to get together.
they
is
would
the
all
thing.
have to
Like,
get
all,
together and they would have to create some sort of system from scratch.
But the
Who's gonna
reason I
televise the games and who's gonna distribute the games and sell tickets and yeah, go ahead.
but the reason I bring it up is I feel like, I mean, this could be, we might be at the cusp of it anyway, but like when we were like all the players now, all the top players, as far as I can tell, are all friends. Like they all like they're kind of like a club.
Well,
You know,
you've heard that Kyrie Irving actually brought this up. You know that.
did he? Oh, okay. No, I didn't
He
hear
actually
about that.
he actually was talking about this like 2 years ago, I think, a year or so ago, about the players should start their
Yeah,
own league, right?
I'm just like, why not?
Well,
Like,
I think maybe with the way media is being consumed now, it's more possible than ever. More possible. I don't think that means that it is possible. It's just more possible. But what does more possible mean? That how far away is that? That's a difficult question. I would say if it's an individual sport, like let's say bowling, right? Bowling, pool, maybe table tennis, where it would be a small group of people who have complete control, right? Even tennis, maybe. Like, hey, we're gonna have our own tennis tournament, and we're gonna stream it on so and such service. Like tennis players could do that very easily. Get the top 5 tennis players to say we're gonna run a tournament and we're gonna keep all the money, right? But NBA is closer because there are fewer players.
it's five.
But
5 starters, five star. Because the thing is, it's like, so here's the thing, just like what you're talking about, right? Like, if the players are like, man, 82 games plus postseason is a lot of wear and tear. And it's like, what would be nice if we had a 40 game season, but we played every game and we play hard every game, right? And instead of having like a playoffs that is totally different from a different style of game than all the regular season,
yeah.
Why don't we just have, more interleague play during, and or even having anyway, we could reinvent the whole thing. And I feel like a lot of the players already know how they would want to do it, or if they want it, like, who knows? But
well,
like a lot of these guys already have like business managers, agents, and all these people that are close to them that already know the ins and outs of the TV deals, already know the ins and outs of like the facilities management,
and
know
of
the ins
course,
and outs of like
you also
ticket
have to
sales
remember
and marketing.
that there's someone on the outside of traditional marketing, traditional broadcasting that would love that.
Yeah.
Like that I think Amazon Prime has rights to the Thursday night football games, right?
Yeah, they just bought the rights.
So
they spent a ton of money on that.
There's someone that would love to broadcast that, but they have to be ready for what was coming against them, like slander and everything else is coming from the establishment because there's a lot of money.
But you would think that they would, like, again. So that's, I mean, as far as sports goes, I would love, like, from what I know about LeBron and KD, and this is very limited, but I would love for them to do that, to just be like, bring it on, because it's important for us, for the players, especially the black players, to just not be owned.
I tell you what would happen.
Metaphorically owned.
I tell you what would happen though. I'll tell you how the NBA will respond to that. They lift the salary cap. They will lift the salary cap, and then the owners, they would say, owners, you can pay these players as much as you want to, and that will break the league.
Win-win-win. How's that?
Oh,
like,
well,
win-win-win.
Hey, look, LeBron James, he's hit the most he's ever made in a season, like 30 some odd million. He's worth more than that. He's worth 3 times that, because when he's on the television, like him or hate him, people watch. So,
but that's the thing, like, win-win-win, man, because that's the part to me
Well, but
that's so irritating about sports.
But that's the thing with the NCAA, though, is that the NCAA is winning, big winning, and why the article has so much grounds is because everyone knows the NCAA is raking in money. So why are you being so selfish? That's what this is really about. This is not about the men and women. This is about the NCAA being selfish.
But that's what I'm saying too, is that like you were talking about breaking down some of these constructs. Like I would, again, to me, like, as much as I like a lot of as much as I like what the NBA does in a lot of capacities, like I really like what Adam Silver as a commissioner. I really like a lot of the owners. Like compared to like football, like I would love for all the football players, but that'd be impossible. Like there's just too many players to deal with. But with the NBA, I just feel like it's a perfect storm. These guys have a ton of money. These guys, it's a relatively small sport. They're all friends with each other. Like they could totally do it independently. I just feel like how amazing would it be for them just to start their own league and just go, forget it. Like we don't need you guys. We don't need owners.
Make a good point. There. People have talked about that. Several, not just NBA players, but people outside the NBA as well. But you know the difference between starting a business and having a job, right? Like starting a business is scary. You gotta burn the boats.
But the thing is, but that's what I'm saying. Like to me, there is so little risk because like the difference between, because these guys are not regular employees. These guys have fans. These guys have consumer base. These guys are walking
That's right.
businesses.
Yes, they are.
So all they need to do, it's literally like what you talked about. All they have to do is show up because they already have a media machine.
Yes, it's called
that
social
tells,
media.
like
That's
talks about events, right?
Social media. That's right.
So all they need to do is like if LeBron said, "Hey, it's a 5-on-5, like an all-star." It's like again, it's like me and KD. We're gonna choose teams. It's like just like the All-Star game. We're just gonna choose teams. We're gonna play. Tickets are. They could name the price for the tickets.
Yeah, they could,
and they would sell out.
Yeah.
And like what's keeping them from doing that?
That's
like,
well.
look, we're gonna do.
That's a good question. They're in a. I don't know. That's a good question because they're in a position where they're looking at. I mean, some of these guys have like $200 million guaranteed contracts, $300 million guaranteed contracts. So I don't know.
Like some of these guys, like frankly speaking, I could be wrong, but I think like some of the top guys probably have like, they could in their homes probably have like a place where they could broadcast a full game. They have a full basketball court with seats and everything.
No doubt about it.
They could probably.
No doubt about it.
Like you could even have it like, I mean, that could be the league. It's like
you say they're gonna
Kyrie's
have
house.
a league.
We're playing at KD's house. We're playing at Steph's house. Like that could be the thing.
That's funny.
Where it's like, Steph's team plays at his house, and that's literally home court. Literally home court.
That's funny.
That's
funny.
Like I would watch that. I would pay to watch that pay-per-view, man.
Yeah.
I'd pay a ton of money to watch those games.
That would be would be fun.
And it's just like why, again, I like Mark Cuban, but why does Mark Cuban have any money? Why does he, like why does he have any say, like in whatever, in what's going on, like with the players? It's like they can manage themselves. They have their own system. And like I said, like I hate the metaphor of, owners. These guys own these players. It's always been problematic to me. It's like,
Draymond, the player on the.
Why I would love for the players to just like, this is our league, man.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you see what time it is, Mike. We've been talking for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me
The
I don't know what to call, what are you going to call this one? Mike and Montreal talk for 3 hours. Oh. Oh, but we went like a lot of different places. That was really, really interesting. Really interesting that I think we're able to talk a bit freer about like sex dynamics in America, or about America, than people in America. Because I mean, I guess technically we could get canceled,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's going to have a large bearing on our day-to-day lives, supposedly. Not to mention, like, the cancel culture cancels you until the next person gets canceled, and then everyone forgets. So
Right.
so I don't know if, I think maybe in a way, honest, open discourse is a good thing, because at least you're able to express your opinion without fear of retribution, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think in some form or fashion, I think Americans not only want that, but they America needs it. Like, I think this is wrong, this is against the grain, but I feel this way because, and to be honest with you, I think that's how we got Donald Trump. And I think if the Democrats aren't careful, they're going to have someone else, just like Donald Trump, when they're pushing too far in some of these like these what do you call these left wing issues, where they're alienating a lot of people in the middle. Like, hey, this is going a little bit too far. You mind if we push this back the other way a little bit? So
I think the problem is a lot of people. I think a lot of people are kind of what we alluded to earlier. Is I think people are mistaking, they're mislabeling the the actual injustices. Like, yes, there are actual injustices that are that are that are manifest, but the ones they have, but I think they're choosing the wrong ones.
or
Right?
better yet, they're maybe hijacking certain ones for their own political expediency, so that
Sure,
they can,
right.
so they get what they can get what they actually want by riding a different horse to the end of the race or whatever.
And who knows, like, and it could be a Trojan horse. They might be, they might be trying to just they activate something that is going to get a lot of uh, press, so they can communicate something else, or maybe they can accidentally make positive change, or any positive change is better than no change. Who knows, right? but but the frustrating thing for me is, especially when you talk about these, a lot of these issues, is um yeah, I think a lot of it, it's a lot of it is sound and fury, right? And ultimately, it's, in many cases, it's self-serving, and it doesn't really matter for anything larger, any larger movement. It's really just like, hey, you know, I got my thing, I wet my beat, or I got my soundbite, and or I got my 10 minutes in the sun. But doesn't really matter, I feel like that's the biggest problem. And that's what I was saying before about this idea of eyeing society, which is, I feel like the goal for a lot of this stuff should be to kind of try to make like baby steps forward for the society,
That's
for the
right.
large
That's right.
group,
That's
for
right.
the
That's
largest
what I was
group of
going to
us.
say. Is this good for me, or is it good for society? Right.
Right. And I feel like nowadays, especially in the United States, it's really just kind of like, let me just get my taste.
Yeah.
Let me just
Get
get my
get
taste,
what I want. That's right.
and it's not so much about the larger, the larger
Picture.
concern. It's more just like,
Well, but
you know what, let me just get my
unfortunately,
piece of it.
yeah,
You know,
unfortunately, America, we're very poor at that, and we don't we rarely think about the big picture, and to our detriment. And it's one thing that makes me, it kind of worries me about China, is that China seems to have that figured out better than America does.
yeah.
So when it's time for China to say, "Hey guys, it's time to sacrifice for the greater good of China," I, it's time to do it now. And
Well,
I think you'll get more cooperation and whatnot from China than you will in America now. I would say that it's more like maybe our grandparents' generation when it was World War II time, and people said, "Hey, we got to ration sugar and chocolate so that we can win the war." Okay, like I would parallel those two against each other, because now
Well,
I don't know if you could get Americans to be unified on anything. So good.
well, I was going to say two things, I guess. Like in response to what you said immediately is, that's been a question I've wondered for a long time in terms of uh, whether you could find any issue that like the majority of people would agree with. Like I'm curious, like to see like, because like whenever you hear about polling or whatever, like the big number would be like 60%. But I would love to see like, is there something that like 90% would agree on now? Like, are there 75% things? But the other thing I wanted to mention was, um, you had talked before. Oh gosh, I lost this again. What was it? What was the first thing? Like, what were you just talking about?
Uh, Talking about solidarity, agreeing on a certain having a 90% approval rating on something.
Wait, but before that, you were saying, uh, oh no. So yeah, in terms of the signs of self-interest, right?
Oh, okay.
So, and how China was beating us in terms of being able to get support for things. Um, I feel like the only thing I would push back against that with is the rise of crowdfunding. Because like you'll see, I mean, as sad as it is for like a cancer patient to say like, "Hey man, I can't afford my my chemotherapy," and then getting that you hear, and maybe this is me just falling into the trap of special interest stories on the news, but like you just hear about these people that like, hey, my house was destroyed during the earthquake. I threw up a GoFundMe, and I got $300,000 worth of donations
Oh yeah.
for this, and it was like instantaneous. And I feel like there are a lot of, and again, I don't know, but this is just purely just sort of anecdotal, is I want to believe at least that there are, pockets of support for things. This idea of like the majority is tough.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But in terms of like, there are people, there are people with the right idea. And when there are things to support, there are groups of people that will support them. And I'm just wondering, like, can we tie enough of those communities together? Can we tie enough of that, of that action together? Because it's weird, because when it happens, I feel like, the election is the biggest illustration of it.
Yeah. Oh,
It doesn't end
yeah.
up being a majority.
The
It
Georgia
ends up
elections.
being like two big groups of 50-50. It's just like, it's not like we're unified all together in this 80% block. It's 40-40, like we'll just
Well,
pull this.
the last time I can remember is probably maybe 9/11. That's
Yeah,
maybe the last
no,
time.
but exactly, and that's the thing. Like you would have thought that, a riot in the Capitol, that's the one thing that kind of makes me feel a little less optimistic, is that it used to be that a mass shooting could bring everyone together. It used to be that like a big tragedy, like this big sort of issue, like with the Capitol, would do it. And now it's like, man, everything can be spun 50-50, you know? And I don't know. On that dour note,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This is good. This is good talk, Mike.
this is another good one.
Good talk.
3 hour,
Well, we didn't
a
we didn't cut
monster.
we didn't cut this one up, so we're gonna put up 3 hours of raw footage, raw. We might not get a lot of hits, but this will
Work in
live
progress.
on in infinitum
Yeah,
of
yeah,
of,
for
of a
sure.
conversation we're talking about, and maybe it'll go down in the historical record, I guess, of us talking about gender dynamics
This is
at
what
this point of it, right? because someone might look back 20 years from now and be like, oh, this is what people were talking about then, right?
Yeah. Well, what it can be is like, it's kind of like one for them, one for us, right? So like we can do the 30-minute ones every other week for the for the regular people, and then like the 3-hour marathon, 1.5-hour marathon. That's just for us. That's just for us.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. Good talk, Mike. Good luck with your your endeavors. I'll be as I won't be too specific. But yeah. And if you have anything you want me to share on social media or anything like that, let me know. I'll help your business out any way I can. I don't know. I'm not sure. Just let me know.
As things develop, we'll make it known as.
Yeah.
As
when you buy the lot, let me buy the yacht. Let me ride on it.
For sure, man. For sure.
All right. Take care, Mike.
All right. See you at the next one.
All right. Bye.